Thanks for logging on to WANE.com. It is Inside the Zone time for the 2010 high school football season. Kickoff on August 20th. Tom Davis, the sports editor of the News-Sentinel, joining us as always, going to talk about and preview the conferences here in Northeast Indiana. And we're going to start out with a little SAC action. Going to be a very interesting season because you've got Lures coming in off a 2A state title, Dwenger a semi-state performance, and Snyder 10-3 in their second year with Coach Tippmann. I think that's probably where you start all the discussion in the SAC with.
Well, you always start the SAC talk with Snyder and Bishop Dwenger. They always battle, and the winner of that game always ends up winning the league, it seems like. But, like you said, with Bishop Lures and the amount of offensive and defensive talent that they have to put their nose in there. People don't realize how many freshmen and sophomores that Lures played last year, and they struggled in the SAC, so part of me wants to say they won't be that good in the SAC, but when you have that much star power, you have to be that good. And so I think it'll be a matter of they are very competitive in the league this year, and then they'll just run roughshod to the state championship again.
Yeah, when you talk about Bishop Lures, you have to talk about all the guys they have coming back because they only graduated 9 to 10 seniors off last year's team. Not trying to disparage any of those guys, but none of them played super prominent roles as far as they go. James Kanapke is back as a junior quarterback after winning a state championship as a sophomore, and Kenny Mullen might be the fastest guy in this area.
Oh, Kenny Mullen is explosive from every angle you can possibly be explosive from, whether it be special teams, defense, offense, he can do it all. And they're going to figure out a myriad of ways to get him the ball. James Kanapke, if you remember at the beginning of last year, was really inexperienced and shaky, just got better and better every single week, and by Thanksgiving he was one of the best players on the team. But the amount of stars on that team, I mean, you could go with Quyan Maddox, you can go with Jalen Smith, another freshman runner, you can go with the veteran Steve Kiermaier. I mean, they have so many different weapons and they can hurt you in so many different ways. And with Kanapke getting better, they can do it through the air, and with Mullen they can do it on the ground, with Smith they can do it on the ground, and defensively those kids just lay licks on you.
Yeah, Jordan Presley was great in the state championship game. Just talented all across the board. Michael Rogers was a freshman last year. I think he's going to step up. We saw him in the state championship game. So Lures is definitely one of the teams to compete. But I got to think you start out with, when you talk about who's going to win this conference, with the 4-time SAC reigning champion Bishop Dwenger Saints.
It starts and ends with Bishop Dwenger, and they're going to win it again this year. They have too much talent on their team. They have studs like Ramon Wright and Tony Springman. Ramon Wright's verbally committed to go to Stanford. Tony Springman's verbally committed to go to Notre Dame. And Cameron Smith is an unsung hero that scored 4 touchdowns last year. He's a great wide receiver, and he also had 4 interceptions from his defensive back position. You throw in role players like Mike Yoder, and again they have a young quarterback who's a senior, but as we've seen with Bishop Dwenger, they just plug a new guy in there and he just does great.
That was my next question, because you take a look at from Goodman to Trevor Yerrick to last year Wade Markley, who signed with Butler. It seems like the question pops up every year, oh, they got to find another quarterback, but they always find a guy that's one of the top 2 or 3 guys by the end of the year in the SAC.
Well, they've got Patrick Ryan this year, and of course they've got a good Irish Catholic kid named Patrick Ryan, quarterback in Bishop Dwenger. But Patrick Ryan played in 25 or 26 7-on-7 games this year. Coach Schwarzkopf said he did a fantastic job, and he has no qualms about turning the offense over to Pat Ryan this year.
And when you take a look at Snyder, who's obviously going to be up there in the race, you got to talk about Coach Tippmann back for his second year, but also they've got some holes to fill offensively. When you take a look at Tyler Babilia not coming back at quarterback, he graduated last year, and also Jason McGraw, one of the better running backs in the SAC. They've got to fill his hole, but I know they're real confident in the guys they have coming in, especially John Nelson at running back.
Coach Tippmann is always confident, and Snyder is a program that doesn't rebuild, they just reload. A down year for them, they might win 9 games instead of their traditional 10 or 11. But you're right, they do have a plethora of holes to fill. Akeem Kelsaw is back at the wide receiver slot. It seems like every single year it's required that a Kelsaw is on the Snyder roster. But from there, Ryan Tunsis is a veteran offensive lineman. Everybody else is written in pencil. And Coach Tippmann is relying on a strong senior class that hasn't gotten a ton of playing time because of those veterans you mentioned, but they need to step up and be seniors right from the get-go this year.
Yeah, and I think defensively, talking to Coach Tippmann in camp, there are some question marks. He's a defensive guy. Devin Rush is going to be playing at St. Francis. Zachary Barnes, a defensive end, all SAC, going to be playing, I believe, at St. Joseph. But Kendall Frederick, I think, is a name maybe not familiar to all the football fans in Northeast Northeast Indiana.
They will be by August 20th.
Yeah, he's a guy, I believe Coach Tippmann told me he's got an offer from Ball State, so he's a mid-major type of prospect out there as a defensive back.
I don't want to get Ball State in any trouble with NCAA violations, but Coach Stan Parrish, I've interviewed him a couple times already this year. He's well aware of Kendall Frederick, and Ohio University has already offered him as well. He's a lanky kid. He doesn't look like he'd be a speedster, but if you follow the track season, you know that he is. And he's going to be the key to that offense and keeping people from passing and then helping stop the run as well. But Snyder has so many questions. It'll be interesting to see. They went into last season, everybody thought they'd be really good, and Southside shocked them right from the get-go. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody shocks them early, but by the end of the season, they'll be one of the better teams in that sectional.
And you mentioned Southside. I'm going to go on to kind of our next tier of teams. Last year, you had Wayne coming in at 7-5. You had Southside finishing at 8-2. Two teams that had been down for a while, but had kind of popped up their heads as trying to butt against the elite programs of the SAC last year. Do you feel like those two teams may be taking a step back as opposed to teams that are taking a step forward because of graduation and a variety of other factors?
Yes and no. I'll tell you what, Southside is going to take a step back. I don't think it's a dramatic step back because they lost so much talent, especially Greg Johnson, who was explosive like Kenny Mullen. He could score any number of ways. But I don't think Wayne's going to take a step back. I'll tell you why. They played great defense last year at times, and they can run the ball. And as you saw in late October when it starts to get rainy and cold and muddy, the teams that run the ball really have success. And they have 4 guys that can run the ball well, led by Jordan Patterson, their quarterback. And they've got Charles Harvard, they've got McQuail Banks, and they've got Tyrell Jones, who was a touchdown machine last year. So they can run the ball and they can defend, and those two things are the foundation to winning football.
And you talk about those two teams, but other teams that maybe are looking to make some noise in the SAC, everyone's talking about in the offseason the changes for the FWCS schools, the uncertainty. Northrop, Northside, Southside. Chevron's going to be back there. For Northrop, that's kind of a question mark. Hopefully, we'll find out tonight as we're taping this on Monday.
I think it's Tim Martone, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, so. we never know until it becomes official. What do you see for some teams like Northside and for Northrop? What do they have to improve upon? Because we don't have an Elmhurst to talk about at this point in time.
Well, that's true. Northrop is going to be rebuilding. They were winless last year, but I'll tell you what, they have to get a good coach in there that takes the program seriously and stays with the program for a lengthy time. They have over 2,000 students in their school. They obviously can excel athletically. Look at their tradition track-wise, and even they're really good in basketball now. They have enough athletes to be good. There's no excuse for Northrop to be winless ever. That just shouldn't happen. Now, Northside, they've got a good, experienced assistant coach in Ryan Hall, who stepped up to be the head coach this year, and he will get that program going. He'll carry on what Casey Kolkman was laying the foundation for. And with Northside, it starts with Adrian Williams, who's one of the best linebackers in the area. He's also a running back for them, but linebacker is where he really makes his paycheck. But in Northside, Northrop, they'll both struggle this year. Concordia will be down; they'll struggle. But you know, it's just a matter of working every year and building a program.
Before we move on to the NHC, I want to ask you one more question. Harding obviously graduates. Roderick Smith, perhaps, in my opinion, I thought he was the best player that I saw in the state last year.
Sure.
Over 6,000 yards, I believe 6,625 to be exact. How do you go about replacing a guy like Rod Smith, and how is that going to affect their 2010 season?
Well, I think with Harding, you'll see that they rely less on the running game. Not totally. It's not like they're going to abandon the running game, but they have a veteran quarterback in Zach Bohaydock, who's a junior now, and so the time for his growing pains are over. He has to be a team leader. He has to make crucial plays. He has to sustain drives when it's third and long. He has to be able to come through. They have a number of talented, athletic guys out there, a wide receiver, and then they'll find some guys by committee to run the ball, and they've got a couple of veterans on the offensive line. Defensively, they're led by Denzel Sanders. He will be their bread and butter, and he will help carry them, keep them in games so their offense can score some points to keep them in games. Harding will be right about where they were last year, about 6-5, right about in that 500 range, but you can't replace Roderick Smith. He was the best player in the state of Indiana last year.
Yeah, I think we can both agree on that one.